Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back to Comment Central. This is actually our first video podcast. In quite a long while, and our first podcast in a very long while as well. We concluded our previous podcast series with some chill shower discussions with Adrian and Mahmoud. So do check that out. But today we have two very interesting speakers here, Sis Enon and Brother Osman. For those who have been regular to marriage guidance courses or Darul Rakam, probably for the older crowd, you guys might recognize them. They've been here for close to maybe more than 20 years, if I'm not wrong.
Mashallah.
And they are also the author of the book Tranquil Hearts. Let me just put it out first for you guys to see. So this book Tranquil Hearts is sold at Wardah Bookshop and Darul Rakam's bookshop. I think some other bookshops in Singapore as well, they do carry them. And most recently, they authored this new book called Sex, Soul and Islam. Okay, so we're gonna have about 6 weeks of content with Brother Osman and Sis Enon, and we're gonna discuss a little bit about the contents of the book. That's number one, and kind of see how they relate to our context in Singapore. Okay, but maybe before that, we'll give some time to Brother Osman and Sis Enon to kind of give an introduction of themselves, who they are, their background, their profession, and more importantly, why did they choose to author the book Tranquil Hearts, and then 20 years on, maybe 15 years on, to author this book Sex, Soul and Islam. Bismillah.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Brother Sidi and Taj, for hosting us, and we're very honoured that Convert Central take the lead in wanting to start this podcast, because this is really not a very easy subject to discuss. Alright, so let me start by introducing myself. My name is Sister Enon. I am a social worker in terms of my training and the work that I do. I've been in this field for more than 30 years, so I'm not only your mother's age, I can be your grandmother's age, okay, but we are cool about it. Yeah. So about 20 years ago, I was the chairman of the marriage guidance course that was organised by the Rakam, and we are both volunteers there. And they then approached me to actually write a book based on the course materials for the marriage guidance course, or what we call MGC. But it wasn't an easy process of just writing or translating the course material into a book. With Osman coming on board, we were able to have a team to kind of join all the various aspects of marriages in Islam. And the basic theme of the book is actually marriage is a vehicle for us as a couple that will help us to journey towards Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. And it has this aspect that marriage actually will help to improve your iman, your amal, and even your ihsan. Ihsan means your good character. So that was the theme of the book that was written almost 20 years ago.
23.
Yeah.
23 years.
23 years ago. Yeah.
23 years ago.
23 years ago, yeah.
I don't even think I was born.
1998. That's 25.
This book is older than you.
This book is older than me.
Fail
Yeah.
maths.
25 and 1998.
25, not 20. Yes.
Oh, 25.
It was so the first edition of the book was actually jointly published by the Muslim Convert Association and the Religious Council of Singapore, MUIS lah. And then we were very thankful that the support that MUIS give. We are thankful of the support that MUIS has given to Rakam in publication of this book. Yeah. So then almost 25 years later, so in 2010, we decided that we want to revise Tranquil Heart to make it more updated to the current issues that the society is facing. And we have written another book actually called Tranquility, Love and Mercy, which is an updated version and with more input. But when we approached the publishers, they felt that it was too thick a book, because it's almost like 10 chapters, and too much a risk to publish a book to someone who is not known. Even though Tranquil Heart has received good review, it wasn't actively published or promoted and distributed worldwide, because I think for the account, the priority is working with the convert, so promoting of the book wasn't very important for them, and we are fine with that. As long as the message get sent to people. So then we decided, they asked whether the publisher asked whether we can take a chapter, and in our thinking that time, sex will sell. But apparently after this last few months of experience, we realized that the topic itself is very sensitive, and people think that this book is a sex manual. Allahu Akbar. No, we are very decent people. Okay. And because people who are the word sex, soul, and Islam, they forgot that there's actually soul and Islam, which is the other component of book. Yeah. So maybe I just go a bit more why I write the book. The book is based on my counselling experience, where I find that a lot of couples have issue with their sexual relationship based on a lot of misunderstanding about what Islam say about sex. Secondly, there's a lot of blurriness about the sexual relationship, the physiological part. People really are not informed about this, and therefore it leads to a lot of issues in couple relationship. And because of that, I felt there's a need to educate them, especially the Islamic point of view. So I was very blessed to have a husband who was also interested in this topic, and actually Osman wrote the book. I provide clinical input and just comment on it lah.
Untuk husband,
Husband, yes, this husband.
Okay, this husband.
Yes, this husband.
Another aspect, another reason why we wanted to write the book, actually, because while we were active in marital counselling, we were looking for literature that can amalgamate these three aspects, which we think are necessary for modern Muslims, modern contemporary Muslims living in cosmopolitan environment to appreciate the traditional Islamic sexual teaching. And these three aspects are the Islamic teaching itself, the hukum hakam, the adabs and so forth. Second is the aspect of sexology, which people need to know because a lot of misinformation needs to be clarified through the topic of sexology. And the third part is how all this affects the marital relationship. So these three aspects, we find that there are no books, no literature that is dwelling into it, and so we decided to write a book that amalgamates these three. So this book basically presents the traditional Islamic teaching on sex from the point of view of modern sociological findings and knowledge to explain how all that affects marital relationship. So basically that's what the book is about in terms of presentation, actually.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Maybe now that you kind of shared a little bit about the book, right? You want to know also a little bit about yourself, like what you guys do as a profession, where do you guys came from, and what kind of experience that you guys tap into when you're writing the book. So if you guys can share that with us.
So maybe I'm actually an architect. I was trained as an architect, and I work as an architect. At the same time, I was volunteering as a teacher to converts at Darul Arqam. I taught the beginners class, and at the same time, I was also one of the lecturers in the marriage gardens course, which are specifically designed for converts. So actually, knowing I had a good career, and based on that, I should have stayed in my career. But the reason why I actually stopped work to write the book, because I think a book that amalgamates these three aspects is not there. If it had been there, I would promote that book. I stopped work and I started writing and I took about how long did I write? 7 years.
I'm a social worker in terms of my training. I've done many kind of work. I work in drug abuse. I was a medical social worker. I do marital counselling and also school counselling. It was a good point that you make, and we do acknowledge that we have to address this. We are not Azatiza, but we have enough marital counselling experience and enough background in knowing what happened in a relationship to write a book about this. And Osman's input is that he was teaching converts, and it is not easy teaching converts because they come with all sort of question that is out of the box, that will be challenging, and that you can survive that. I think inshallah you'll be able to present Islam in a very rational and inviting way. I think the most important validation of the work we have done was that the first book which was co-written with Fatima, my social work friend, was actually published by Muiz. And we appreciate Muiz because when they came in on board, they have their Azatiza to edit and look through the book, and they even paid some Ustad here and Ustad Fidaus to actually check all the hadiths, and that was an important step in the development of the book. So I felt that was one kind of appreciation and understanding of the work we do. So the second book that we wrote was an extension of that, but we just go depth into the topic about sex.
Okay. So I guess.
So does that assure you a bit?
It does. And in fact, I was going to bring up one thing that was also mentioned in the Quran, where there was an incident where Nabi Dawud was approached in his chambers, and then he was king, right? And he was approached in his chambers by a group of jinn who asked him about a conflict in business, right? And a man who owned about 99 sheep, and also with another man who owned only one sheep. So they were having a business dispute and saying that the man with 99 sheep was asking the man with one sheep to give him his sheep, because he was not good at being a shepherd. And he was saying that if you're that good at being a shepherd, you only have one sheep, you have more. So at a point of time, Nabi Dawood, Prophet David, what he said was that in matters of business, men would always lie and will be dishonest to each other, and they will not treat each other with proper morals, right? And for those who are able to do so, they are then the successful believers. And when you actually look into what he said, right, you realize that for Prophet David, the way he had tried to counsel this man and gave this man advice, it was a type of knowledge or wisdom that didn't come from religious text. Rarely would you find specific religious text by saying that in business, this is what you do, right? Or maybe if you then kind of widen the context, rarely you find religious text that gives specific guidance on a specific matter, right? And what then this incident is trying to say is that wisdom comes from many sources, right?
That means it is his experience rather than something
so
which is
wisdom is
divine.
formed through experience, and when you blend that with knowledge, then that becomes a higher form of wisdom. That's number one. So and also the second point we'd like to bring up is that religious knowledge is not the only knowledge that gives success to a marriage. Right? It's not the only way of understanding how marriages work, right? If it's the only way, then asatizas wouldn't go through marriage issues, but everyone goes through marriage issues, right? So that the fact that you guys have clinical experience, you guys have interacted with a lot of converts and couples throughout the years. I think that's a very good source of experience and help you to.
Can I address one thing? There's a valid explanation, but I think I also want to address for there may be among your audience people who are very concerned about credibility, and I think it's a very valid concern. And that was also my concern going into this. The question is, can you read this book? Is there a basis for you to read a book on Islam? Because the title says "An Islam," written by somebody who is not officially trained teacher. Let me put it this way. The Islamic requirement for believing in something is not your credentials. It is actually written in Suratul Kahfi, the 6th or the 5th ayat, which says that if a fasik comes to you, if ja'akum fasikum binaba'in fatabayanu, if a fasik comes to you with news, you can consider me as a fasik, because at this point, since you are doubting my credibility, you cannot take me as an alima. I'm a fasik. Okay, I come to you with news. This thing at this point is news to you. You cannot consider this as ilm, because you have not taken me as as credible. So what the Quran says is, if a fasik comes to you with news, what did he say? He didn't say, Allah didn't say go and check his paper qualification, go and check which university he went to, go and check which guru he went to,
which teacher.
What he says is fatabayanu, find and clarify the evidence. So what we do in this book, actually, you will see that this book is heavily footnoted. Almost every opinion we put, we give you the basis, we give you where we get that idea from, we give you the pitch that sometimes we even quote the relevant passage that on which we base our opinion. So for those who are really concerned about credibility, I share that concern. So if, like I said, if I had found another book written by a credible teacher, I would be promoting that book. But it's not there, unfortunately. So I come to you with this book, not on the basis of my credibility, but on the basis of I provide for you the evidence. That's it.
And I think as someone with like zero knowledge on this topic, before I read this book, right, it is nice that you can learn the fiqh of marriage, of sexual laws in a lot of courses. I think a lot of Asatiza would teach that. The marriage preparatory course that you guys taught teaches exactly that. But that book, this book essentially, it provides a structure or a framework for thinking about sex in Islam. And that is, I think, something that is not teachable through an Asatiza. I think there's a thought process that you need to read through the book, figure out that thought process, and then try and fit it to your own worldview and align it with your own worldview. So that is not really in itself like Islamic knowledge per se. It's more of the way you think, the way you perceive like these issues.
Maybe just one way to approach the book. For those who are really concerned, you don't take us as Asatiza, you don't take us as the professor, okay? But what you should take is the ideas that we promote, and then you can double check with with qualified ustads.
I think I was telling you earlier, I think what was attractive to me about the book is that it was comforting to me. I'm not sure if this is like a personal thing or like maybe others would relate also, but growing up with a lot of Western representations of sex in the media, you see it as what, like in the hadith, like as if an animalistic interpretation of it. It's very much an act, and rather this book paints it as an experience and as a journey, and one that is filled with positive emotions and not just this very carnal instinct to act upon, which is what really comforted me, because I personally found it very off-putting before I read this book, and after I read this book I feel like I got a more holistic idea of sex, and I think that was very helpful now.
Good. So we just really wanted to get this into the first segment to kind of establish the fact that this book comes from a good place, right? And of course we understand when it comes to discussions in Islam, whoever that comes and joins the circle of discussion must come with prerequisites. We're here trying to ascertain that, in this particular discussion in the podcast, we've got the right people sitting in these seats, right? They have clinical experience, and not just that, but as well as the fact that in the production of this book, the contents have been run through by trusted, credible teachers in the community, right? And following that as well, if there's any doubts about the book, I think Brother Osman and Sister Enon will be happy to answer any questions that anyone reaches out to you guys. And you guys are free to also verify any of the contents of the book with any teachers that you know. So with that, I think it's a very nice way to kind of introduce the book, introduce yourselves, and maybe then we can jump into the contents of the book and why it's important to have this discussion, right? So, but we're coming to the end of this first segment. Inshallah, we'll conclude this first segment first, and then subsequently we'll open by talking about the importance of having discussions about the topics related and discussed in the book. And we'll see you there, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.